What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and another Reaper format video. Now, this will be the last of the sort of normal coverage that I do for Reaper format. I'll be showing off one more deck in the format, which is like an FTK deck, which I generally just do test hands for to show it off. So this will be the last Reaper video that I show off on my channel that actually has games like this. And it's been quite a journey, you know, it's been fun to explore this format that I personally started out playing online Retro Yu-Gi-Oh with, so that's been fun to revisit for me. But I'm also excited to dive into the next format, which is Chaos Return, which I'll be getting into next week. So definitely stay tuned if you want to see some of that. But if you're here for the Reaper content, don't worry. We will have more things harkening back to Reaper format. You know, we'll have locals in the future that are in Reaper format. So definitely stick around to watch those. And if you do want to play games in Reaper format or any other format that I feature on the channel, definitely head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below, where you can find games in that format and any other format that I've covered on my channel. So to close out my normal coverage for Reaper, I wanted to show off the Uria deck because, you know, we did get the Sacred Beasts in Shadow of Infinity, and those are all very cool monsters, and unfortunately, the only one that I think can be somewhat viable in Reaper format, and viable is a term I'm using very loosely there, is Uria, because Uria is based around just sending 3 continuous traps, which isn't too hard to get on your side of the field, and also it has a good effect once it does hit the field, unlike Haman, which Haman sends continuous spells, so that's also pretty easy to set up, but Haman also has a much worse effect. Uria is a level 10 pyro monster, 0 attack, 0 defense, so it can be searched off Sangan. And it can't be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 face-up traps you control to the graveyard. This card gains 1,000 attack for each continuous trap in your graveyard. Once per turn, you can target one set spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy that target. Neither player can activate spell or trap cards in response to this effect's activation. So, you know, the way that you play this deck is just playing a bunch of powerful continuous traps to stall out your opponent until you draw into Uria. There are different ways to build this deck. I saw many different variations on this deck in the Reaper format Discord server, which I'll also link in the description down below. But this is sort of the build that I settled on. You know, I'm not really the biggest fan of my own build for it, and I'm not really the biggest fan of the other builds that I saw out there, but I think that just comes down to Uria being, like, not quite there in this format. You can build it, though, and this is my first attempt at it. So for the monsters, we're just playing triple Uria because, you know, this is the main sake of our deck. You know, we're trying to buff it up with multiple continuous traps in the grave, and also just once we have it hit the field, just being able to attack in for a ton of damage, pop our opponent's back row is very nice. We also got a Sangan to search out the Uria, which is pretty good. And there are potential ways to recur that because we are playing Call of the Haunted here for the Sangan. If I was to change the deck further, I would cut the Call of the Haunted as it is dead more often than it's live. And, you know, while recurring a Sangan to then bring out a Uria and then search out another Uria is really cool, in practice, it doesn't really happen that often. But I do think the one Sangan is still good to have in the deck to search out Uria and just be potentially a monster to attack in with. For our only spell, we've got a Dark Hole, and mainly because, like, I don't really think this deck really needs a ton of spells. We do have some double snares in the side deck for if our opponent goes into, like, Royal Decree, and we've got a Knock and a Comfy in the side deck as well in case we're going first for the Comfy and if we're up against a deck like Monarchs or something, or if we're up against a Flip Focus deck in terms of Knock. But other than that, we're not really playing any spells because this deck doesn't really need to play those spells. And because we don't really need to play spells, we're also playing Curse of Darkness, which is a continuous trap that deals 1,000 damage after spells are activated to whoever activates them. So, you know, this is definitely a lot harder for our opponent to play through than for us, although they can just generally wait out until they draw a way to remove the Curse of Darkness and then do their big plays, which is one of the big flaws of this deck. It's a pretty passive deck overall. And, you know, your opponent can just wait until they can do a big push and get through there. Now, we do have some ways to protect our traps, though. We've got fake traps. These are very good at protecting our traps. You know, it doesn't cost life points like something like Solemn Judgment would, which we are also playing Solemn Judgments because this is another way to protect our traps, and we really do want to be protecting traps in this deck. But fake trap is a really good option here. It stops Mobius, it stops Breaker, it stops any number of cards that would potentially deal with our back row. For the other traps, we got double Gravity Bind to slow down the game a bit. We got triple Nightmare Wheel to also slow down the game. Triple Shadow Spell for the same reason. A Spellbinding Circle for the same reason. And triple Wall of Revealing Light for the same reason as well. These are all here just to slow down the game a bit, prevent our opponent from being able to do things while we set up our Uria plays. Although, you know, things like Wall of Revealing Light can add up over time. So you do have to be careful about that, especially if you're sending these for Uria. We've also got triple Mask of Restrict, triple Skill Drain here as ways to stop our opponent from being able to, you know, out our board. Master Restrict is sort of pre-siding against Monarchs and Jinzo. But I do think that because monarchs are very prevalent and a lot of decks do distribute things, it is good to have here. Skill Drain is very good against a variety of decks as well, and it will shut off a lot of the problematic monsters that might give you trouble. And lastly, we've got like ways to kill our opponent here. We've got Ominous Fortune Tellings and Nightmare Wheels to burn them for a lot of damage. You could also potentially play Stealth Birds in this deck as well, but I wanted to lean more into the Uria stuff because if you're just playing the Stealth Birds, it kind of is just like, you know, a typical burn deck with a Uria package, and I'd rather just focus on Uria itself. So we do have these here to burn our opponent further, but ultimately we're trying to end out the game with Uria. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's very cool. We've also got triple Solemn Wishes to survive while we've got our thing set up. It can also refuel what we might have lost to a Wall of Revealing Light or a Solemn Judgment, so that's pretty good there as well. And lastly, we got a Torrential Tribute to wipe away our opponent's board. We're not really playing many monsters, so TT is likely going to be live a lot of the time. For the side deck, I already talked about the spells here. We've also got triple Anti-Spell Fragrance. This can be good against like Last Will Monarch deck potentially, or Reading Gate decks. I don't really think this card will come in all that often, because again, you know, if your opponent can just wait a turn to kill you, like that generally is good enough. So I'm not really sure if this belongs here, but it is something to potentially experiment with. We've got triple Embodiment of Apophis. This can be good, you know, if you want to get a bit more aggressive, because this is a trap monster. It clears up a back row, and that's pretty nice. We got triple Threatening Roar for the OTK decks. We've got a Ceasefire for flip focus decks and also deal a little bit more burn damage. For the Fusion deck, you know, it's a pretty standard Fusion deck that you might see in this format. We're really not going into this all that often. We don't have Stein. If we potentially manage to get our opponent Stein, that's something, but we don't really have any way to cause that to happen. So realistically, you're never going into this, but it is good to just have a fully equipped Fusion deck here just in case. But that's going to do it for the card by card. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck actually plays. Okay, we had a game against PJ Darkness. They freaking gets on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're diving into the rock, paper, scissors, and they will win the RPS. They are going first here, which is quite unfortunate because we generally want to be going first, so that way we can set up our plays. But, you know, this is a pretty standard hand, just a ton of continuous traps here. Opponent's going to go for a Comfy, rip a card out of hand. They take a peek, and they're going to take the Wall of Revealing Light. So that's a bit unfortunate. That's our main way to stall here. But it's not the worst thing in the world. They're just going to set 3, pass back to us. We draw into another Wall of Revealing Light. So, you know, what are we going to do? We're going to set 5, pass. I feel like this is pretty good. We've got Ominous Fortune Telling to burn them every turn. We've got Wall of Revealing Light to stall them from attacking in. We've got Solemn Wishes to recover our life points. And if they do ever have a way to deal with our board, we've got a Solemn Judgment to stop that. So I feel pretty good about this. We go for Ominous Fortune Telling here because I misread the card, and I think that every standby phase. No, it's just during your standby phase. So this was a big misplay. You know, I activate Curse of Darkness here. This wasn't a misplay. You want to activate Curse before your opponent potentially has the chance to activate any spells here. So I flip that up. They go for a Mystic Tomato attacking in. I go for a wall, pay 3,000 because we've got the Solemn Wishes to regain our life points here. And now we draw and we gain 5. The unfortunate thing here is that now we can't really do anything because, you know, our back row is clogged and we only really play back row. So, but the good thing is that we get to, you know, go in, call monster, deal damage, and, you know, just keep going back and forth like that. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. I think we still call monster here because, you know, they've got cards still left in hand. And the limiting factor here is mainly whether you can normal summon or set, and you can only do that once per turn. So I figure it's more likely they've got a monster in hand, and we see a new Uria there, so that indicates that that's another monster there in the hand. Of course, knowing that that we've got Ominous Fortune Telling, they might not want to, you know, set things in the back row, so that is something to keep in mind here for later. But I do still think that I'm going to call monster here. So I go for monster. Unfortunately, it's a trap, and a trap does shoot, so that means that they might potentially set that next turn. And they do not. Okay, they don't set trap does shoot, so I mean, we could call trap here. I'm going to call monster, though, because, again, I feel like they probably still have a monster in hand. Because, again, you know, they can't normal summon or set there, but it's a dust shoot. Could be a second dust shoot, could be the first dust shoot that we saw. But either way, you know, it's something there. They're going to set a card here, pass back to us, and we are going to go for a monster there because I feel like they did set the dust shoot. They've got to set that at some point. We've got over 5 cards in hand, so, you know, I feel like it's bound to be dust shoot at some point. We hit a trap there, though, so I think we're going to start calling trap from here on. We know they've got 2 traps in hand, so it's a 2/5 chance of hitting that, and they could have more traps in hand as well. So we're going to call trap now. We hit the Saku, so they're going to take 7 from that. I feel pretty good about that. And we're just going to pass back to them. I miscount my hand and think that we have 7 cards, but we actually just have 6, so we're just going to leave it at that. So they're going to go for dust shoot here finally, and that's not one of the dust shoots that they set before, so we're going to go for Solemn on that heavy there because we don't want that heavy going through. We need our things set up here to survive. There's an argument for not Solemning, though, just in case one of their other back rows Solemn. that's something that could potentially be something that they've got. But like, I feel like they probably would have, well, that new set could be a solemn, I guess. But if the old set's there, I feel like that probably would have been a solemn of their own on the Wall of Revealing Light. But I guess they know about our solemn, so they don't want to go down by half. But yeah, the new set's solemn anyway, so that's just going to go through there. And they're going to blow up the whole board. They go for a Rhoda here, grabbing Dawn. They don't really need to do this because they've already got lethal damage here. Even through just what we know about, they've got lethal damage. So they're just revealing more information to us. And, you know, they still win either way there. They just revealed a bit more information than they had to. But either way, we're going to go into game 2 because they are on Warriors or Strike Ninja Return or something like that. We're going to actually side out the Masks of Restrict in for Embodiments of Apopus. I feel like that's a pretty good card to bring in against Warriors. Can wall up against some of the stuff that they're doing. And also, it does clear a back row slot for us. So we're just going to set Spellbinding Circle, Skill Drain, Curse of Darkness, and Gravity Bind here. The way I figure it is if they got Heavy Storm, you know, we can just set the wall and wall them up that way. So I don't want to set both wall and the bind. But I think other than that, this is pretty good. Now, I should go for Curse of Darkness here in draw or standby just to prevent them from actually, you know, using spells profitably. So that's what I should do. Unfortunately, I don't. And that would have been good as well, because then if like they activate MST here in response to the Gravity Bind, then, you know, they take 1,000 from that. So it really would have been the best thing to do to activate Curse beforehand. They're going to go for Comfy here. We activate Curse too late. And unfortunately, if we chain it to a Comfy, we won't actually be able to deal them damage there. So yeah, unfortunately, that will happen. We'll lose the wall, but it looks like we're still fine here because, you know, we've still got our Gravity Bind set up. We're going to set a Fake Trap here. Just to potentially protect our cards here. But this does put us in an awkward spot because we don't actually have a way to win the game from this position. The good thing is that if we draw Uria, that's a way to do that. But, you know, if we don't draw Uria, that's kind of rough. We go for Skill Drain here on the breaker so they won't get that. And we're just going to keep passing back. I feel like this is still pretty good overall. The thing that I'd be worried about here is like Reaper. Spirit Reaper would be kind of rough to attack in. But if they do have that, we've got Spellbinding Circle, which will blow up the Reaper. If they got Sangan, we can Spellbinding Circle it as well. But that's a bit more awkward because it will linger if they, you know, tribute off the Sangan. So it just clogs up one of our zones. They're going to go for Nimzov's Archer here, tribute 2, and that won't do anything because skill drain's up. So they can't activate that because that's cost, but like it doesn't do anything. So I think they're just clearing their board in case we've got burn that way. So that could be something that pops up. But what we're going to do here, we draw Uria finally. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for Spellbinding Circle on the Amazon's Archer because I feel like that's not really the most useful thing in the world. And then we're going to bring out this Uria, pop that back row there. And now we're going to attack in to the Amazon's Archer. And this will be at 4 since there are 4 continuous traps in grave. So they're going to take 2,600 from that. We're then going to set a Solemn Wishes here, set a Wall of Revealing Light, and pass back to them. We can't call the Haunted back Uria because, you know, it can only be special summoned from hand. So the Call of the Haunted here is really just for Sangan, and it's another reason why I should probably cut this card. But anyways, we go for Solemn Wishes here, draw a card, gain 5. We draw Shadow Spell, which can be decent at walling things off. And we're not going to attack into the set because we have seen Uria there, and if they do flip up an Uria, I want them to attack in to the Uria. So that's why I'm not going for that play. We set an Ominous Fortune Telling here as well, just to start getting the burn in on them. They're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Solemn Wishes there. We go for Ominous Fortune Telling. We just call Monster because, you know, again, you know, this is sort of the limiting factor that they've got there. It's a Hades. They drop down to 2,700. They flip up a DD Warrior Lady and attack in to the Uria. You know, you do what you have to do. That will banish the Uria, but they do take 2,500 here. So they drop down to 200. They're going to set 2 pass back to us. And now we're just going to call Monster yet again, and that will just be the end of the game. So we were able to win that one, got in with big damage with Uria, and then our burn traps were enough to close out the game otherwise. So kind of cool to see that happen there. Although it does definitely show how slow this deck can be. So this deck definitely isn't for everyone. It probably isn't for me either. I'm not the biggest fan of it, honestly. But, you know, it is something cool to do. We draw Uria here, and we actually don't have access to 3 continuous traps, which is kind of wild. So we're going to set Ominous Fortune Telling, Shadow Spell, Solemn Judgment, and Fake Trap there. We've got 2 of 3 continuous traps here, but unfortunately we don't have the 3rd. They're going to attack in with the Sangan there. We're just going to take it. I think we could have potentially Shadow Spelled the Sangan, but then if they tribute off the Sangan, we did see that they're on Hades. That's really awkward for us. We're going to go for Ominous Fortune Telling here. We're going to take a peek at their hand. We see that they've got Return there. Unfortunately, we whiffed on the call there. We're going to set an Embodiment of Apophis here. And they're going to tribute for a Mobius. We're going to go for Fake Trap on that, revealing Shadow Spell and Embodiment of Apophis. and they're going to add a Spirit Reaper to hand. That will wall us up. If they do commit it to field, they're going to attack in with the Mobius. Since we're going to go for Uria here soon, we're just going to Shadow Spell that Mobius, and then they're going to pass back to us. We go for Monster here, and unfortunately we hit a trap yet again. And I think, you know, it is unfortunate to lose the Ominous Fortune Telling, but I don't want them to get in with the Spirit Reaper and rip a card out of her hand. I guess we could just use Embodiment of Apophis to block that, but there are chances that they've got ways around that. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to send those 3, bring out a Raya here. This will actually only have 3,000 attack, not 4,000, because it's only continuous traps engraved, so the fake trap will not count. But I miscount here and put it at 4,000. We catch this later in the game, so it doesn't actually come up again. So we do manage to hit in there. We set the Curse of Darkness and another Solemn Judgment, pass back to them, and we go for Curse here, so that way they'll be taking 1,000. They're going to think about this, and they're going to go for Dark Hole. We got to think about this as well. We could potentially save our Solemns for later, and I think in hindsight, that might have been the better option here. But instead, we just do go for the Solemn, preventing that from going through, because I'm a bit worried about what they might do otherwise. But we've got other Solemns to deal with those, so I think I should have just gone for it. They would have taken 1,000 from that. But yeah, I don't know. I just go for this anyways, and I set the Gravity Bind, and this will be at 3,000. We catch it here. So, you know, it is corrected, and then we do adjust the life points to actually be the right thing there. So they're going to bring out a DD Warrior Lady here, attack into the Uria. We just go for Gravity Bind because we don't really have defenses after that. So I'm fine just walling up with Gravity Bind, hoping that we draw into something good. Just Spellbinding Circle. We're just going to start popping that back row there. I think I actually had a chance to pop last turn as well that I didn't take. So that's kind of unfortunate. I go for a Solemn here to protect my cards because, you know, Uria here gets cleared by the Warrior Lady, and then they attack in for a ton of damage, so I can't let that go through. But unfortunately, they've got this Amazon's Archer to tribute those away, and that will indeed be the end of the game. So unfortunately, we weren't able to win this one here. I think if we had played it a little bit differently this last game, like letting the Dark Hole go through, then things could have maybe turned out differently for us, but I'm not really sure how we were getting around this Amazon's Archer or the Heavy Storm. So yeah, I think that we were in a tough spot here either way. And it does show that this deck is not really the best. You know, even if you've got Uria on field, you can't necessarily hit in all the time because like Spirit Reaper will wall you off. Things like DD Warrior Lady will deal with the Uria. So it's just a very, very tricky thing to do. And you can't even activate Skill Drain while Uria is up, as that will negate the Uria. And you don't want that to happen because then you're just setting 3 continuous traps for a 0/0 monster. So it's not really the best thing in the world. But we got another game to show off with the deck. So let's dive into that one now. Okay, we got another game here against the Warudo Dark Arm God, frequent guests on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're diving in to the games here, and let's see how we do. This is a really good opener. We got more than 3 continuous traps, and we've got Uria, and we've got burn cards as well, so we're feeling very, very good here. So we are going to just set 3, 4, pass back to them. We can set all 4 of these because we're going for Uria. Again, if they do Heavy Storm, we got Wall in hand to sort of wall off a little bit, so that's pretty nice there. But as is, they're going to go for an MST right off the bat, hitting a Shadow Spell, which is a bit unfortunate. Then they go for a Breaker, and they hit our Nightmare Wheel. We really wanted that Nightmare Wheel to go through because that's burn, so that's very nice there. But we still have the Shadow Spell to block off the Breaker from hitting in at least, so that's something nice. But it is a bit awkward here. And they're just going to pass back to us. So I feel very good about this because now we can set up some more continuous traps here. We just go for a Massacre Restrict because, you know, this stops them from going for a Monarch or something like that. So I feel pretty good about that. We gain 1,000 off that Upstart Goblin. They attack in with the Shining Angel. I think here I could have potentially gone just Wall of Revealing Light and, you know, paid 2,000, sent these 3 to grave, had Solemn Worship to gain back that life, and then attacked in to Breaker there because we'll have a ton of continuous traps in grave. And if they wanted to do things like Shining Angel crashing into Uria, that's a bit rough for them. But as is, I just let that go through. I think it's fine, personally. I go for Solemn here, gain 5. We draw another Wall, so that's a bit unfortunate, because if we'd gone Wall last turn, we could have potentially, you know, just set the other Wall. But we don't know what we're going to draw here in the future. And since we do have this other Wall, we just send the Wall that we've already got on field by paying 1,000 and bring out a Uria here. We attack in to the Breaker there. They're going to take 3,400. We set the Wall, pass back to them. And they're going to think about this a bit and go for a creature swap here. Now, I have a bit of a choice here. I could potentially just fire the Wall now, pay 3,000, prevent them from ever hitting in. Because once they get Uria, they can just pop the Wall, which is really rough for us. But that is a fair amount of damage that I'd be taking from there. So I don't know if I want to do that yet. I'm just going to let it go through here because I feel like I've got other stall cards that I can use instead. And just blindly walling here might be a bit bad. They're going to attack into the Shining Angel, which they that Uriah's at 0, so I guess it's just a way for them to clear it, but it's kind of awkward there. Luckily, they don't use the effect to pop our back row as well, and we're feeling pretty good about that. So, we got rewarded for holding it, although I don't think that will necessarily always come up in the future. We set a TT here, pass back to them. They go for Sidra. We could potentially TT this, but I do have wall to block off whatever they do. So I feel like wall is perfectly fine. I think about this a bit, and I will just wall for 3k. And then if they do something to potentially get over wall, then I've got ways to get around that with TT, right? So I switch the Shining Angel defense. I set the skill drain, pass back to them. And we draw into another Uriah, so that's pretty neat. We can go for Uria here, and we will indeed go for Uria there. So we're going to send these 3 continuous traps to go for a Uria here. And we're going to pop one of that back row. We pop these brain control, which is honestly pretty good that we pop that as, well, I mean, actually, it doesn't really matter that much if they brain control Uria. So, yeah, either way, this thing's at 8,000. So if we manage to get in here, this is lethal damage. Unfortunately, they've got Book of Moon. So we popped the wrong back row. If we had been able to pop the book, they would not have been able to respond to this card's effect. So, this really was a 50-50 thing here. And we actually would have won this one if we had popped the right thing. But unfortunately, we popped the wrong one. They set down the Uria. And now they can attack into the Shining Angel here and bring out another Shining Angel. And then they can attack that Shining Angel into our Uria. So that's kind of rough. We draw into a Solemn Judgment. Not going to help us here. We set that pass back to them. They're going to switch the Sidra to defense. They don't have to do this. Mirror Force is not in the format, so they don't have to play around it. But they're just doing this anyways. This gives us a couple more turns, so hopefully we can draw into some way to get out of this. But we draw a Fake Trap, which will not help us here. They attack in for 14 yet again. We draw Mask of Restrict. That's just not going to do it. That's really unfortunate ending to this game. We lost the 50-50, and then we just drew terribly at the end there. But that's what you get for playing a deck like Uria, right? Like, this deck is not really a good deck. Sometimes you draw the wrong parts of your deck at the wrong time. Sometimes Uria pops the wrong back row, and you just lose to the other one. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. This deck is not really the best, and I hope these games are definitely showing that, even though it is cool to bring out a Uria with a ton of attack here like we did that last game. So we're going to dive in to the game 2 here. Hopefully we'll be able to win this one instead. And that's a pretty good opener. We got a way to stall. We got a way to burn. So we're feeling pretty good about this. We set 5, pass back to them. And, I set 5 because we got the Nightmare Wheel to set up the burn. We've got the Solemn Wishes to gain life. We've got the wall to, block off their attacks. We got Ominous Fortune to burn as well. So, I feel like this is a pretty good set 5 to do. They're going to set 4, pass back to us. And we go for Solemn here. We also go for Nightmare Wheel there as well. So we draw, gain 5, and then they'll lose 500 in the standby phase there. But they've got a Royal Decree here. We have to Solemn that, and that's a bit unfortunate. We did not side in to our double snares because, the previous match, they didn't side into decrees. So I figured, well, maybe they don't have decrees here. But unfortunately, that will come back to bite us here. But we go for Ominous Fortune Telling here, and they do indeed have to show it. That is on goatformat.com. We checked the ruling there, and that ruling does still apply in Reaper format. So, yeah, we called it wrong, though, because we called a monster. And we're going to choose to keep the Curse and the Gravity Bind in hand because, again, we've got wall to wall off their attacks. If they do have a heavy storm, we don't want to play into that. But maybe we should have set the Curse. That might have been something to potentially set there, especially if we draw Uria. It's pretty good to have Curse on field, but either way, we're in kind of an awkward spot here. And we do gain 5 from the Solemn. We set a Gravity Bind here just in case they've got a way to deal with wall. And also, wall is kind of awkward to go into here because, we pay 3,000 and then we're down to 350. So we don't necessarily want to do that. We activate Gravity Bind, pass back to them. We call Spell. And we hit a monster, but that's a monster that they can't bring out right now because they've only got 1 Light Engrave. So that'll be a monster that we can reliably have in their hand. So that way we can just keep calling it with Ominous Fortune Telling here. They go for a heavy there, unfortunately, though. So that will indeed wipe away the entire board. So we can't call that again. They're going to attack in for 2,100 with the Cyber Dragon there and pass back to us. We draw a Gravity Bind here, which is pretty good. We're going to just set 4, pass. They've used up heavy, so hopefully they don't have another way to get it around this. We activate a Curse of Darkness here. They go for a Rhoda, so they will pay 1,000 from that. And they will get the Stretch Out freed, which is pretty good here. But we do have a Gravity Bind to block off their attacks here. So they're going to attack in. We activate the Bind. They pass back to us. We draw a Nightmare Wheel that can get the burn on, and we do set it. We have clogged our zones, unfortunately, but I do think it is good to set the Nightmare Wheel because we need to get burn damage in now, right? Our win cons are basically going for burn damage or going for Uria, And so we've got to get one of those on the field right now, and we've got the Nightmare Wheel on the field. So we're going to burn them for 5. They set another, pass back to us. We draw another Nightmare Wheel. Unfortunately, we can't, bring that out, unfortunately. But they're going to tribute for a Golden Homunculus over the monster that we Nightmare Wheeled. So actually, Nightmare Wheel will be destroyed because it says if that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. So you don't need it to be destroyed like Spellbinding Circle does. But either way, they bring out a Soul Period Light here as well. We do draw Dark Hole, so we could go for Dark Hole here. However, we get Curse of Darkness up, and if we activate that, then we don't get the Skill Drain online, right? So I actually don't go for the Dark Hole here. Instead, I just go for the Nightmare Wheel because I'm more scared of them having like flip effects or things like that that can, give us trouble than wiping away their entire board right now. But I go for a Nightmare Wheel here on the Golden Homunculus there. So they're going to tribute off the Freed for a Cider. If they tributed off the Homunculus, then, we wouldn't have been able to get in this burn damage here. But this does deal with, like, I guess this does, like, get a bigger attack monster out there. So that's something, but I don't know. We draw Solemn Wishes, so that's pretty nice if we were able to commit it, because we then gain life. But unfortunately, it doesn't turn out that way. They flip up this Dekoichi. It should be an attack here. But I go for Skill Drain. They didn't really give us time to respond to that. So, they should not have drawn immediately there. But it ultimately worked out fine, I think. Yeah, but like, they drew and then they had to shuffle back. So it doesn't really affect the game overall that much. But either way, they're taking 500 turn. We just have to last 7 more turns. But we do know that they're on decrees. And generally, if you're on one decree, you're on multiple decree. So yeah, it's sort of just like a waiting game. Who will be able to draw into what wins the game first? And, we really need to draw into a way to win here. Luckily, we do indeed have that, as long as they don't have Decree. So what we're going to do here is we're going to activate Spellbinding Circle on the Dekoichi. We're going to send the Curse of Darkness, the Spellbinding Circle, and the Skill Drain to grave to bring out a Uria here. And we could potentially, well, actually, we can't really attack him because we got the Bind. But we could have potentially sent Bind instead to attack in that way. But I don't really think it's worth doing because we do have lethal damage here with the Ceasefire if that goes through. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set the Fake Trap, the Ominous Fortune Telling, and the Ceasefire, pass back to them, and then we go for Ceasefire here, and that will indeed just be the end of the game. So yeah, that will be all she wrote for this one. But we still have that game 3. So I bring in the double snares here as opposed to the Master Restrict, because Master Restrict doesn't really do much in this matchup, I think. I mean, yes, they've got the Homunculuses, yes, they've got the Sidras, but realistically, it doesn't really matter that much for the matchup there. But this is a pretty decent opener, all things considered. We got 3 continuous traps. Now we have 4 continuous traps and a fake trap on top of it. So we're feeling pretty good about this. They are going to just go to battle phase here. I activate Gravity Bind. I think I could have gone just in main phase, like brought out Apophis at end of main. But then they had the potential option to tribute off the Shining Angel for like a Sidra or something. So I don't know. There are multiple different directions I could have gone there. And there are also multiple directions I could have gone with this turn. I could have actually, gone for the Apophis, gone for the Wall, or gone for the Solemn, and then brought out a Uria here. They don't necessarily want to do that into a Shining Angel, which can then go into a DD Warrior Lady and, make things tough for me. So I want to sort of hold off for a little bit longer before going for that. I also misplayed because I should have activated Solemn Wishes the turn before, but I didn't do that. I forgot it. So, that's how it goes sometimes. I then pay 1,000 for the Wall here, and I bring out a Uria now that we've got the Gravity Bind, so now we can use that potentially later. And now we'll attack in to the Shining Angel there and deal 1,600. They're going to bring out another Shining Angel, and then we can just set a Gravity Bind, pass back to them. We don't want to set the Skill Drain because we don't want Skill Drain into Uria. That would be kind of bad. But I think I could have potentially said I do a Fake Trap here, so I could have just used Fake Trap. And, just good having it on field. They go for Snatch. I make a misplay here. I should activate Gravity Bind in response to the Snatch, but I'm like, okay, I've got Fake Trap. So if they use the Uria on the Gravity Bind, I can just Fake Trap it. But you can't actually do that because that is in response to the activation of Uria, and you can't activate Spell Traps in response to the effect activation. So I majorly misplay here. I should just go for the bind, but I don't. I also am thinking about the earlier game where they took control of Uria and didn't pop our back row. So I'm like, well, okay, there's a chance they don't do that. And then we just get to save the Gravity Bind for later. But that was a major misplay on my part, personally. Because now we don't have the bind. We're taking 2,900 here that we didn't have to take. And that is very unfortunate. I don't think that misplay actually ends up mattering in the long run of this game, as you'll see. But yeah, we also draw a wall here, so we do get that to sort of wall up a bit more. So that's kind of nice. But, you know, it would have been nice to just do the gravity by not taking that 29. We would have actually been at full health here if that was the case. But we go for a wall, paying 3,000. They pass back to us. We draw a Nightmare Wheel. So we do have a way to burn here. So we're going to set that pass back to them. And they're going to switch these to defense, pass back to us. We draw a skill drain here. We go for the Nightmare Wheel to get that burn damage in. We also gain 5 as well. And we pass back to them. They're going to set 1 pass back to us. We draw a Shadow Spell, which won't really help us here, but it's something at least. And we're going to pass back to them. They've got Decree, though, and this is why it doesn't actually end up mattering here, because with Decree up, even if we were 2,900 life points higher, you know, as long as we have these cards on field that aren't doing anything, we're just losing the game here, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think the Nightmare Wheel still gets destroyed. I don't quite know. It might stay on field, actually, given that Decree is up. But either way here, this will be 42, 6,200 plus 300, so that's 8,500. So even if we were 2,900 life points higher, you know, we would still be losing this game. Even if we were 2,900 plus 3,000, 5,900 life points higher, I don't think we'd be losing, but we'd still be in a really bad spot. We'd have to just rely on whatever we drew here to actually win the game. I guess we could have used... No, yeah, because Nightmare would still be on field, so our zones would be completely clogged. So really the only thing that would get us out of that was a top deck Uria. And even then, I don't think that we were going to be winning that one. So, or I guess we top deck Uria, there's a chance, but they probably would have kept the Reaper in defense in that case. So... yeah, I think we were just losing this one either. Oh, they had Sork as well, but they didn't have a Dark Engrave, so they wouldn't have been able to bring out Sork. But either way, that's going to be the end of this game and the end of my normal coverage of Reaper. Again, I'm going to have one more video showing off an FTK deck with Exchange of Spirits, so look forward to that if you like that sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of bittersweet leaving Reaper going into Chaos Return, but I will say it will be fun to dive into a new format and see what that format has to offer. If you want to follow my explorations of that format or any other format that I feature on the channel, definitely subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and helps build the community more. I'd like to reach 1,500 subscribers by the end of the month, and we're about 40 subscribers off. So with your help, we can make it there. If you want to support me directly, I've got a Patreon, links in the description down below. If you join the Patreon, you get shout out in the videos. So big shout outs to Tyler Compton, GMYFS, Dumptruck, Rinswin, Porktupkin, and Brendocker. It means a lot that you all support me this way and encourages me to make more videos like this in the future. I hope that you enjoyed this video as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from Watch from Zero, and I'm signing off.